Have you ever noticed that we as humans, whenever we mess up, we feel like we need to run and hide? You ever wonder why that is? I mean, it's not new to humans. It goes all the way back to Genesis. You see in Genesis 3 with Adam and Eve when they sinned and suddenly they're like, oh, we're naked. Man, that's not great. And they run and they try to do the whole fig leaf thing and cover up. And, you know, that wasn't a great plan. And God comes walking through the garden, right? And they hear him. And they're like, oh, and they run and hide. Why do we do that? Why do we let our shame become so overwhelming? I mean, I know for myself personally, a lot of times when I've fallen in some sin, one of the last things I want to do is run to God, because I'm like, God, I just messed up. How can I come to you? How can I do this? Well, to pick up where we left off last time in Jonah chapter 2, verse 3, we see the story where Jonah has been running from God and then gets chucked over the boat and because he's running from God, and this fish comes and swallows him. And so now he's sitting in the belly of this giant fish, whale thing. And it says in verse 3, "For you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the flood surrounded me. All your waves and your billows passed over me." Notice he's attributing this trial, he's attributing this to God. He's like, all of your waves have passed over me. This is your doing. You're bringing this in my life. And sometimes God brings these trials in our lives to wake us up, to shake us out of our self-pity, to shake us out of our self-indulgence, our self-righteousness, whatever it might be, to kind of wake us up. In verse 4, it says, "Then I said, I am driven away from your sight, yet I shall look again upon your holy temple." I love that. He's like, God, I feel so far from you. I feel so distant from you. But I will look to your temple. See, in the Old Testament, it's not like today where the Spirit of God dwells with us if we walk with Christ. In the Old Testament, the Spirit of God, the glory of God, rather, dwelt in the temple. That was his place. That was like his house. So he's like, God, I will be with you again. I feel so far from you right now, but I will be with you again. I love that. Rather than sitting in the shame and letting his shame cover him up and destroy him and eat at him, he runs to God. He said, God, I will see you again. I'm coming back to you. I love it. Verse 5, it says that the waters closed in over me to take my life. The deep surrounded me, the weeds wrapped around my head at the roots of the mountains. He's like, God, I'm being brought down. I'm being destroyed here. Literally and figuratively, these weeds are entangling him. Verse 6, "I went down into the land whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought my life up from the pit. O Lord my God." I love that. It's like, God, though I'm so destroyed right now, I'm being brought down so low. You bring me up. You lift me up, God. It's you. And it is God. So why do we fight so hard for ourselves? Why do we fight so hard to make ourselves better when God's like, hey, just come back to me? Like the father in the story of the prodigal son in Luke 15, where he just wants his son back. He's just come home, son. Just come home. I mean, God doesn't require that we make ourselves perfect and pretty before we come to him. He just wants us to come to him. It says in 2 Peter chapter 2, in verse 9, "But you," speaking of Christ's followers, you and I who love and follow Jesus, "but you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of God who has called you out of darkness into marvelous light." So let's leave behind this darkness of our shame, this darkness of our sin and guilt, and run into that marvelous light of God. He says in Hebrews 13:5, "I will never leave you, I will never forsake you." So come on home. Don't let the shame hide you. Don't let your shame surround you in darkness. Run into His marvelous light.